Very much, and I'd like to say, before we go anywhere, special thanks to Anne and Uillinn. When we were wondering how to publicise this project, because it got it got a bit of publicity when we first did it, it went nowhere after that because there was nothing to go anywhere, if you know what I mean. We subsequently made a print of it, but that wasn't ready for the first month or so. But I contacted Anne and a couple of other people around the country and asked if they would have any interest in showing it. And this is before really they knew anything about it. But Anne wrote back, I think within 24 hours, to say that she would be happy to support it and everyone would welcome it. And that's such a nice thing. So I want to say a special thanks to Uillinn for that. And it's lovely to be back working with Uillinn again. Done a few projects here in the past, and they've always been really enjoyable, so here we are. So this is not, we don't really see this even as an exhibition, although we are showing the project that was our sort of main project in 2024, including two of the sculptures that were part of the project, Helen Comfort's two pieces, which are down there at the rear of the room, and you've all seen them on your way in. And we have a few photographs up here, which you're welcome to come and look at more closely afterwards. One is just a key to who everybody is in the image, because all the participants are there were very specially chosen and rechosen out of a whole range of people that we would have loved to have had in this project, and to represent all kinds of fields, but I'll come on to that in a moment. And the other images here are an image of the original painting, Raphael's fresco in the Vatican, which in reality is about the size of this wall. Some of you will know it well from seeing the original, I'm sure. And this is, of course, our cheeky version of it. And then there's another photograph or two photographs of the process that we engaged in, which was very much a trial and error process, as you will hear. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to start though by saying a few words about Na Cailleacha and the concept behind this project and how we got to do it. So Na Cailleacha is a collective of, it began as 8 older women artists. Sadly, we've lost one of our group of 8 in the course of this year, Helen, who made the sculptures behind you. Very sadly died just after we had. She's in the project up there. I might go around and point out who everybody is shortly, but Helen is the maybe most prominent Cailleach, directly behind the Provost of Trinity, who's with Mary Robinson in the centre there. She died just 2 weeks after we had filmed the event and before the print was officially launched or made available, you know, to television and other media. So now we're down to 7, but the original idea for Na Cailleacha was Helen Comfort's. She had an opportunity in 2020 to go to Cyprus for her 75th birthday, where she had already spent a bit of time in a studio complex where there were 8 studios. And so she invited 7 friends and herself, all of whom were involved in making art. She wanted us all to be over 70. One person wasn't quite there, and in fact she's only just making it to 70 now, but we made an exception for her because she's been such a valuable member of the team. But the rest of us are, and we're listed on this anyway, so you'll see it, are Helen Comfort herself, Gerda, who's here on my right, Karen Nelson, who's a musician who's only heading for 70 now, and all the rest of us are comfortably over 70. So we want, I'll give you the rest of the names: Patricia Hurl, Terry Rudin, Barbara Freeman, and Rachel Parry. And of course, Rachel Parry is the West Cork artist, the Rachel Parry, who's had solo shows, or a solo show here in the past, and would really love to be here to say that she fully participated, fully in 120% in every bit of this project, but she didn't want to take part in it, so she's hiding in the middle of the group there. And the reason why she didn't want to take part in it is because we touted this as a project that involved Irish women who were leaders in their fields. And Rachel didn't feel that any of us had a right to claim that we were leaders. And she's dead right, we haven't. We put ourselves in because we are the makers, and on the day we were the assistants, helping everybody else to be where they needed to be. The space was very restricted. There wasn't really that much room for many other people there. Although we had a band, and Cindy will talk about it, of students who helped us. We also reckoned that we didn't want to sit, we wanted to have visual arts people in there, but we did not want to sit in judgment on fellow visual artists and say, we have you but not you. So we decided the best thing was to shove ourselves in as a kind of chorus in the back. And if you look at Raphael's original painting, there are lots of little heads there that, you know, really haven't ever been properly attached to famous philosophers or anything. So the Cailleachs came together at Helen's inspired invitation in 2020. We were supposed to go to Cyprus, but of course COVID broke out and we didn't make it to Cyprus. Instead we went all the way to Ballinglen in County Mayo, and we hammered ourselves into a collective over a period of 4 weeks. Everybody making art their own way and talking to each other and getting to know each other. And I don't want to spend too long talking about that, but if you want to know more, we can talk about it at the end. We came away, though, after 4 weeks, with a mission statement which said that we wanted to increase visibility for older people. We wanted to increase visibility for older women, because women of all ages still have trouble, I think, with visibility. But particularly when you hit a certain age, forget it, you know, or that was the lesson we were being told in 2020. So we thought, well, you know, let's just do what we want to do and stuff that one. And so we proceeded to make art. We thought it should be about women in some way, because we were all women. And we thought it should be about aging, because we had specifically said we were over 70. And then after that, the sky's the limit. We wanted, there were some concerns that we all had, which we now probably share universally. We really care about the planet and what's happening to it, because our grandchildren will be the people who have to cope with the fallout of what is happening now. And so we wanted climate change to be somewhere in all of the work that we did. I've mentioned health already. We wanted social issues, equality, inclusion, and a sense of place. They were sort of important to us. But I think that's enough about Na Cailleacha now. Let's jump on. We did a few projects together, all of which just made us more of a collective. You know, everything you do, if you don't fall out over it and go your separate ways, makes you even more of a unit. And that's what happened for us. So we got on to 2023. So about January 2023, and we were sitting around a table wondering, where do we go next? And Patricia Hurd, who some of you will know, had made a film years ago about a painting in the National Gallery. She'd made a little live short film, 15 minutes or something, with her partner Terry Uillinn, about the military manoeuvres painting by Richard Mulvaney in the National Gallery. Richard? Forgotten the man's, it's not Mulvaney. Anyway, don't worry about it. They made that, and Patricia loved that experience, so she just mentioned it. And so we thought, if we were to do something that was a reenactment of something historic, the only reason why we would do it is if it somehow promoted visibility for women as artists, and women as agents in the world, and aging. And so we decided we should take the idea of an artwork from the historic past seriously. I'm an art historian, and if I can jump into my art historian mode for a minute, I used to teach in Trinity College, and years ago I was part of a team of colleagues, 2 men and myself, who took 45 history of art students to Rome. And while we were there, one of my distinguished colleagues had permission to get inside a private palazzo where there was a very famous but privately owned painting, huge painting called The Rape of the Sabine Women by the Italian mannerist Pontormo. Anyway, we looked at it, and my two colleagues talked for a while about colour harmony and the form of the figure and the contrappostos and all the kinds of things that art historical jargon feeds us all with. The students were, I think out of 45 students, 40 were women. And we went through all that, and then one of them said to me, did I want to add anything to it? And I just thought, bloody hell, this is about rape, you know? And all they can talk about is, to women, is contrappostos. And what were the contrappostos for? To better show off the female body that's about to be raped, you know? So we had a few words about that. And that's enough about that. But it did make me think we need seriously, when we're teaching art history, to look at a lot of other things that traditional art history has not embraced. So we decided in the Cailleachs that we would take Raphael's School of Athens, which has 50 characters in it, one of whom is a woman, but she's got her back to us, and all of the others are men. And we thought, that's all about education and philosophy, and makes a particular point in the Vatican about secular education, and it goes beside an equally big fresco which is about the church and liturgy and so on, theology. But if this was the sum total of secular education in the Renaissance, in ancient Greece, which is what in the School of Athens, it was transmitted without much change to the Renaissance, and then in Raphael's painting it was transmitted again to another couple of 100 years of Western education. So we thought, let's have a go at that painting. It's crying out for it. So we invited leading Irish women in various fields covering science, the law, social science, actually housing action, which is maybe not a science so much as a practical skill, the arts, music, farming, sport, fashion, art history itself. Rachel Moss from Trinity College is sitting in the front there holding a picture of Raphael's painting, in case we forget it. And a lovely cohort of scientists ranging from Maria McNamara, who lectures in paleontology here in University College Cork, to the philosopher Clara Fisher from Queen's University, Katrina Lally, who is an engineer, Vice Provost of Trinity College, Emma Teeling, who's a bat expert, Aoife McLysaght, who's a genetics expert, Aoife Gowan, who's a biodiversity food scientist. The farmer is Hannah Quinn Mulligan. Sport is represented by Nora Stapleton, who, have to think for a minute, what does Nora Stapleton do? She played rugby for Ireland, of course, and football for Donegal, and now is on Sport Ireland. And she stood in very graciously for Rashida Adeleki, who was busy rehearsing, or not rehearsing, you don't do it if you're an athlete, training for the Olympic Games. And she in turn was sort of standing in for Katie, not Katie Taylor, Kelly Harrington, who was equally concerned with the Olympics. So people who could do it said yes. People who couldn't told us in advance. Nell McCafferty was very ill and not able. We have up there in the back row, your Stapleton is one to the right of that column wearing white and holding the football. Next to her is another scientist from Trinity College, Sarah McCormack. Next to her is a woman called Frances Ruane, who is the first woman head of the Economic and Social Research Institute in Ireland, and also, many people don't know this, but advisor to the Scottish Government on economic affairs for a decade. And next to her is a trans person who represents the gay community and the contribution that they have brought to Irish society. And then over on this side, in the front here, wearing the yellow shawl and holding the image, is Rachel Moss, who is was head of the History of Art department in Trinity. They rotated, so she isn't any longer. Next to her, Na Cailleacha, who is a Moroccan woman living in Ireland, working on migrant communities and particularly youth programs. Immediately to her left is Sinead Burke, whom some of you might have seen on television last week, speaking for disability. She is only 3 feet tall, but she came back from lecturing in New York on Irish fashion, and particularly fashion for people with disability, the day before our event, so that she could be here for the event. Next to her, on the left here, is a woman called Gráinne Mulvey, who's a curator, or who's a composer, I should say. Gráinne Mulvey was having some of her music performed in the Royal Albert Hall in London that night, but she wanted to take part in our project, so it was touch and go to have her there and get her to the airport in time afterwards. She said, if she did make it, I'm glad to say, to her own concert, but she said if she had to miss either one, she would not have wanted to miss this one, which was really a lovely, encouraging thing for us to hear. Behind them, a very distinguished figure indeed, is Cindy Cummins, who's right here on my left, who's a great help and who is the first woman choreographer in Eastóna. Eastóna was slow to admit dance, but they couldn't really hold back when they came across Cindy. Next to her is Gráinne Mulvey, who was the first director of the Irish Film Institute and is the director of the International Film Festival. Between the two of them, Uillinn, the poet. Behind her, the tall figure, on her left behind, is Catherine Rose, who founded Age and Opportunity and who also founded the first women's publishing house in Ireland. Next to her is the first woman director of the National Gallery of Ireland. Even the National Gallery moves into modern times. That is Gerda Teljeur from Belfast. And next to her is a writer called Malatu Okori, who had just won, I think it was the Costa Book Prize for short stories, because she lived in direct provision for 10 years and raised her children in a direct provision hostel and lived to tell the tale beautifully. Okay? And then coming back over towards the middle, at the back, Rita Fagan, who's a housing activist, Mary Daly, first woman president of the Royal Irish Academy, is a historian. Beside her, Emily Logan, first woman Garda Ombudsman, but before that, and more importantly, first ombudsman for children ever in Ireland. So I suppose we pick these people because we try to pick people who were the first in their field, but we also wanted to say that if education was what Raphael and the Renaissance thought it was, the changes that women have brought in terms of, science, biodiversity, housing action, care for children, all of that kind of thing are represented by this group. Just behind that little group is Orla, can't say her second name, it'll come back to me in a second, who is the head of neurology for Beaumont Hospital, Orla Hardiman. Next to her, barely visible, is, with the red thing on her head, is Susan McKee, who wrote, she's a press ombudsman now, but she wrote a book that some of you will remember very well, exposing family child abuse in Sligo some years ago. And behind her, immediately in the middle, is Alva Smith, who founded the women's studies courses in University College Dublin, and next to her on her right is a woman called Jennifer O'Keefe, who is, as we speak indeed, doing Trojan work on the International Migrant Rights Council. So they are women who are really out there fighting for their places in the world, for things that are much bigger than them. And of course, in the middle then, in the place where Raphael had Plato and Aristotle, we have Mary Robinson and the first woman President of Ireland, but in this context, it's more important that she was the first woman Chancellor of Trinity College, because this is about education. It's about education that hunkered down and gave out one story of education for hundreds and even thousands of years, and these women are the ones to change it. And next to her is the current woman Provost of Trinity College, the first woman ever in that role, Linda Doyle. She's also an engineer, first woman head of the School of Engineering, and in the middle in front of them, reclining on the steps, she said she never wants to recline on the steps again, is the youngest person, 19-year-old Saoirse Exton, who was Ireland's, if you like, Greta Thunberg. She is the one who represents Ireland on the United Nations Youth Council for Climate Change. So a future leader, a leader already, but she's definitely going places. So they're the lineup. And they weren't all, it didn't come to us immediately that it was those people and only those people. We did invite some other people. We only have 41 people here. We should have 50. We couldn't fit them all. Because the other thing is, when some people weren't able to make it, at the last minute, 2 people had to fall out. One because she got COVID the day before, and another because she was diagnosed with terminal cancer just 10 days before we were due to go out. So, you know, we had some difficulties like that, and we decided we would go ahead with this number because they fitted the space. But the space now is really important. We had the idea. We didn't immediately know exactly who we'd ask. We did know that we would ask Mary Robinson, and by the way, she agreed within 24 hours, so that was very positive for us. But we also had to find a venue for it and figure out how we would do it. And we thought initially we would do it out in the open air in Kilkenny during the Kilkenny Arts Festival, simply because we identified a building there that might provide us with a classical background and steps and so on. But that didn't work out. And then we thought again, and we thought, you know, if this is about education, let us really just go to the Bastion, go into Trinity College and see if Trinity College will come on board. And they did. Rachel Moss, head of the History of Art Department, gave it her all. She helped us out at every stage of the way, got us past all the, you know, security issues and health and public safety, and we held a lunch for everybody in this senior common room when this was over, and we recorded all of the conversations when we had this bunch of women together. We haven't done anything with those conversations yet, but we are preparing a film right now on the project. And I'm going to stop in a moment because it's gone on for too long. But the other thing we should say about this is we couldn't look for funding for it until we had a venue, so we could say it was definitely happening. We didn't get that venue until January, and the project, we wanted it to happen around International Women's Day, which is the 8th of March. So it was helter-skelter then, and we invited Cindy on board at that stage as a helper, not just a distinguished president, and a number of other people. But jumping on, we couldn't look for fundraisers until we had a venue, and until we had secured 1 or 2 people, so we could say to them, this is what we're doing, and it's not just some, you know, kind of chicken-run project. The former president of Ireland has agreed to be part of, and so has X, Y, and Z. And so we needed to pin them down, but we couldn't ask them to do it either until we had a project and a date, because you can't go to people like that and say, will you do it, but we don't know when yet. You know, they can't agree. So all of that was suddenly so last minute and terrifying that we lost our nerve a dozen times over, but we did it anyway. But the other big, major drawback of all of this is that we were too late to apply for Arts Council funding, so we didn't get any money from the usual source. We approached a number of private sponsors that we knew were sympathetic, but for one reason or another, none of them actually came up with the goods. So we limped along to the 9th of March when we were going to schedule it, we didn't have a solitary cent in the budget for it. But we decided we'd do it anyway. And with the help of Trinity, at least we got the venue free and the use of the common room free. We decided that we'd find the money to pay for lunch, and we didn't offer anybody payment or even travel expenses to come. They all said yes. The only person whose travel expenses we paid was Saoirse Exton, because we didn't think it was fair to ask a schoolgirl to pay her own way to be involved in this project. So we'll come back to the funding before we're through, because we have managed retrospectively to fund the project. But I think it's important that, you know, even if you are all over 70, and three of the pilots are now over 80, that money shouldn't stop you. You know, it's just not a good enough reason or a good enough excuse. So go for it if you have a project that you believe in, and we did, and people came and helped us miraculously, like Cindy, and of course Gerda was already a sitting duck because she was there. So Gerda, will you say a bit about the costumes and stuff?
Yeah, okay, I've got it.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Do you want me to go get them? Are they in that coloured bag?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always forget something. So I wanted to tell you about the costumes, because as you see, the costumes is a kind of important part of the painting. And as you also heard from Catherine, we didn't have a cent. So Catherine came up with the idea that we go to the charity shops. And many of us already frequent the charity shops just for clothing and for anything. You know, they're the best thing to get rich materials and anything. So we started kind of in the autumn of 23, we started collecting a bit. And then later in the year we got together in Killorgan, and Catherine and myself found a charity shop. Thank you. And they had heaps of curtains, all different kind of satin materials. So we got quite a nice bunch of that together. And slowly we started getting more materials. We all got together in Dublin and we went on a hunt in Dunleary to all the charity shops. Rachel knew many charity shops because she's often in Dunleary because her daughter lives there. So, and then I took all the material home, a pile of them, in my studio, and they had to be aired, everything had to be aired, and as soon as there was sun out, etc., that, you know, it had to be spread and all that. And Rachel came up with a color swatch in between, because we started collecting our material, but looking at it was quite bland. You know, the curtains, you know the way the curtains are, they have to be neutral and so. And if you look at the painting, it's quite colorful and we have a lot of light and dark contrast. So Rachel made a swatch with what we had and what we more had to go for. So we were getting more precise in what we were going to get. And then later on and Rachel came up with how to make the costume, another thing. Because we needed 50 costumes and we didn't have a lot of time. As it turned out, we only had 2 days to make them. So she had, I know, but it's possible. But we first went for the color, because it's very important if we wanted to reflect the painting, that we have the right amount of light and dark, about warm colors and cold colors. As you see, that's all spread, and the very light colors. And the quantity of the colors as well, how big is the amount of color, etc. So we had to work through that, looking at the painting, and then what do we do? And because it makes a difference for a composition when it's totally flat, or where there's some depth in it, or, you know, so we had to think a bit as a painter. Are we painting this, and are we, yeah. So we went through all those things. And then we tried Rachel's. I brought a sample with me. Oh, sorry about that. we left early in the morning, so it's yours in it as well, is it? Yeah. So Rachel came up with, it's called a chiton or a toga.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, something like that. So this is a piece of curtain, and what's it? Yeah. So I did this. I stitched by hand because my machine went on the blade. So it only had to be stitched there. I can put it on if you like. Yes? Okay. Just to see how it works. Because I tried it on at home, and the thing was to how does it fall, how does the drape go, how does it, you know, and this is a curtain, but if it's a cotton sheet, we have a huge amount of cotton sheets. Oh, yeah, this. Isn't it elegant? So, no, there was something else. Oh, I wore it in the plate a bit, and something else on it as well to give it a bit more color. And here's Catherine's. That's your, oh, you had it under something.
I think that one's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. So there's very little stitching involved in itself. So we went on for a while till we had our big sewing day, which just looking what we were doing now. And so we collected more and more till we thought we had the right colors, and then Maeve Lambert, who also became part of the project, she had some rich material from stage work, from theatre, and Terry and Patricia found another shop where they found some rich material. So between all the bed sheets, the curtains, and the rich materials, we kind of had enough. And then we went to Catherine's cottage because we needed a space. First with a big pile of material, and we brought it to Catherine's cottage, and we laid it out in color coding on a corner seat, a corner sofa. And then Rachel and myself were there the day before. Other people came. Not everybody of Na Cailleacha was part of it, because many had different jobs. Everybody has their own kind of work. And we had 3 sewing machines. Rachel, Helen, and Eve Lyons. She came. She was an expert in theatre costumes and how to work for the theatre and how it would look on a photograph, because we kind of wouldn't have an idea about that. And she kept saying, it's not a ball gown. Just, in other words, just do the essential stitches and get it together. But she had a great system of marking down what we did. We had an image of the painting. I brought Sister Wendy's book, and it had a great image in it of the painting, so we could reference to it. And Maeve Lambert had made a special she marked, so this is the painting, this is the original painting, so she had marked it in sections, so we could break down all those 50 figures into sections and also color code what was necessary for the section, because overall it's just too much to see. So that was a great help. So, and Eva had a system from referencing that print, making the costume for the area it's in, bundle it up, put a note on it, and put it in a package. So there were all parcels ready for when the big day came. Cindy and Abe took over. So we did the sewing in 2 days, We started one morning and we ended the next day at 11 o'clock, and it was just sewing and eating, but it was great fun. It worked seamlessly. Everybody did what was ever necessary. Helen was behind the machine and she stayed as long as she could, and Carol came in for giving us lunch, and I went again, and Patricia and Terry came in to make film and to do. But the three of us, Rachel and Eva and myself, and Helen at the time, we just kept on sewing and finding pieces with material, tear it down, do quick stitching, bundle it up, till it was a whole pile. And then it went to the next stage to Cindy. I think that's about probably more or less what we did, wasn't it?
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe then instead of talking about the Cailleacha collective,
Yeah.
now we get Cindy to talk about the practical
Yeah,
process,
because
and then we
that's
come
an
back to
important part.
the
Yeah.
collective.
Yeah, because this is only a small facet of what was happening.
Sure. Okay.
Yes, so I was brought into the project in January. I was invited in on a Zoom session. And I think at this point Maeve Lambert had been invited in. She's a theatre designer and director, lives in Kilkenny, and she had recognized that this project was really different than the previous projects with Na Cailleacha, in that it's actually a performance. And because it's not, most of the Cailleachs are not performers, she recognized, oh, we're going to have to really look at this as a performative piece, as a performative action, rather than a kind of stage portrait. It was like a 15-minute performance for Kim. That's how we looked at it. So she asked me to come along because she thought, oh, we definitely need someone who knows how to arrange bodies in space and time. That's Cindy's job. We'll get Cindy to come in. So I was invited in, and a couple of weeks later we went to Uillinn, and we were given this room in Uillinn, and we actually projected the original painting up on the wall. And it was such a great day. It was really the start of loads and loads of ideas about the costumes, about the numbering, about putting people into these different groupings, about how to deal with the space, because what I do as a choreographer, the space is really, really important. Like every time I make a piece, the space is actually a character of the piece. So I have to kind of consider, and that's why this piece really resonated with me as well. So we spent the whole day with this image projected on the wall, so we could just sit with it and soak it up and talk and have some lunch and then talk some more. And then Catherine and I, at that point we had invited the photographer Ross Kavanagh, who's very prominent in the theatre and dance community, and we thought he would be the perfect person to take on something like this, and it was brilliant that he was available. So Catherine and I went down to the location at Trinity and met up with Ross. And Ross and I just went off in this little corner and we're like, talking like crazy loud. What about this? Oh, the pillars. You know, like every time I look at this, see these globes up here, the glass globes? Those are lamps that we really had to turn off. We were like, we gotta get those lamps turned off. We can't be there, you know. Also, just outside, if you've been in this building, right here, and on the other side, these giant elks in these huge glass cases. So even like I was standing on the stairs and things, and Ross was looking at it, and he took a couple of snaps, you know, just to sort of look at the perspective. And we realized in order to be able to do this properly, he was going to have to be all the way back, pretty much with his back at the door, to be able to get the width and the depth of the space properly. So, but then also narrow it so that we didn't have the elks because they couldn't move them. But we did get the lights turned off, so that was great. So then after we did the recce, we kind of went away, and myself and Maeve looked at the image, at the painting, and just thought, oh, okay, the only way we're going to be able to get our heads around this is to break it down into these groupings. And so that's when we put this together, and you can come up if you haven't seen it. So we created these separate groupings in order to be able to say, oh, that's the blue group. Okay, the blue group has to, you know, these are a certain, you know, grouping of people. So then when we were going through and assigning who would actually be in those groupings, we could say, oh, that's so-and-so, number 45, and she's like this. So there are other considerations like people's age. If someone was elder, you didn't want to put them in a position that was going to be really tiring or hurt them. Hence, the youngest one is doing the most difficult job right there in front because we knew she would be able to do that. And also, it's just really nice to have her as a very prominent character in the piece. So, when Meg and I were looking at this, doing a lot of talking and putting these groupings together, we knew we had to get this done before the sewing happened. Because then, as Gerda was saying, that's number 6, 7, and also even put those costumes into the groups. So then there was the whole thing of how to try to bend the space, which was really difficult because the original painting is very flat and very wide, and we just couldn't do that in this space. So it was trying to, as much as possible, keep true to a lot of the gestures and relationships in these groupings, but also make it so that it actually works in the space. So that's why these side groupings kind of go up at a diagonal like this, when normally they would be kind of more spread out in that fashion, but we couldn't do that. So it just made sense, but then to do that, it also, and to have the figure in the front, also brings the eye back into the two central figures. So it's that kind of like choreographing and creating that shape with all the people to make sure that the eye is always like going straight to the main figures. And we brought in quite early on the students from Trinity. That was actually, you set that up very nicely. That was really brilliant. And we had about 10 students to begin with, and it went down to about 6 by the end, but they were incredibly enthusiastic to help us out in whatever way they could. So one of the things we talked about and ended up doing was before the day of the actual shoot, you know, we have to have some kind of rehearsal. But we can't ask all these people to come in twice, right? So we had the students.
Oh yeah. Just to say, it's also a working building. There were lectures going on, and students and academics who were ready to devour us.
I was just about to say that. So in the rehearsal day that we had, and some of the costumes were finished, we could put the students into these different groupings. So because we only had 5 students, we were like, right, we'll do red group. Okay, photograph that. Okay, we'll do this group. Photograph that. The whole time there were tour groups coming through. So we just had to stop, and then they'd be all embarrassed. We'd be like, oh, sorry, should we go? Should we leave? Like, no, it's fine. We're just working on a project. We sort of wait very patiently, and eventually they'd go, and then we'd set up again. So we got a chance on that rehearsal day, it was about 2 weeks before the actual shoot, to put people in the groupings, put the students in some of the costumes and in some of the groupings, and that is also right here. So then what Ross did is he made a montage for us to be able to work with. So even like figuring out where the two central figures were, we had to shoot those 2 figures several times, either all the way back on the steps there or all the way down on the steps here, just because everything then had to line up according to them. So it was a very interesting way of making choreography, you know, very different than what I'd done before, but I really loved it. So on the day, the students were brilliant. They were helping out in every way, helping out with the costumes, helping getting teas and coffees. I think the group, like, they loved being together. Like, all of these incredible women, you could just feel the energy. So one of the most difficult things was like, okay, we're gonna try it again, you know, trying to get people to start stop talking because they were having such a good time chatting with one another. And what I'm holding there is actually an iPad. And the iPad is hooked up to Ross's camera. So as he shot, I'm doing this, but then as soon as the shot was taken, I could look down and go, okay, we need to move so-and-so this way, and we need to go. So I was then directing with Ross, do you remember that? And also his assistant, whose name I've forgotten, but she was brilliant, Kate. And so we were kind of this triangular thing. We were like, okay, we're going to go again. And then I do this. And it's like, boom, okay, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, okay, so-and-so needs to come forward, so-and-so needs to lower their arms. So, which was great. It was brilliant to have that instant feedback, you know, to work with the technology in that way. Trying to think of anything else. Maeve Lambert, at the end of the day, I mean, she started off with, you know, helping to create all of the shape of this, but then at the end of the day, she ended up stage managing this entire thing, and she was amazing. She was just the right person to have involved to go, right, Eva's going to be in charge of costumes, and these students are going to be working with her, and this person's going to be in charge of this, and you work with her, and she just had everything done. So we started exactly at 12 o'clock, and we finished exactly when we wanted to, and it was pretty remarkable. Like, I've never been in a production that happened. So that was brilliant. Yeah, I guess that was it. Oh, just an anecdote. When Mary Robinson walked in, right? So it's Mary Robinson. I was so looking forward to meeting her. And she walked in, and the first thing is like, what do you call her? Oh my God. Like, hello, Mrs. Robinson. And that's what I said. I was like, oh, this sounds so strange. But she just turned around and she went, oh, hello. And I swear, she would walk right by you on the street. It was raining out. She had this, like, little old raincoat on and, you know, the hair all over the place. And, you know, it was just so amazing. It was like, oh, there she is. And she's like, oh, great. So where do I get my costume? Like, right this way. So, yeah, it was just such a great project to be involved with. And I don't know, I mean, there's lots of other little bits and pieces I can talk about, but it might be just really nice to, do you want to do questions, or shall we talk about Cailleacha a bit more, or?
What do you all think? Do you want to have questions now? We're happy to answer questions about collectives as well, and being in a collective, but do you want to ask any questions?
Can I ask you a question? It's slightly facetious. How did you get Helen's statues up there where they're both looking over the edge, and health and safety would suggest that the hordes of people going straight through the whole tableau as well? Did that happen at that time?
I'd love to answer that, because Helen's sculptures were never meant to be there. But there are, if you look at the Raphael painting, there are painted sculptures in the background, high up on the wall, and we did want to replicate that if we could. And Helen she was very cheeky to make those in the first place, but to make them out of what is really like old duvets, you know, and to make them so beautifully and brilliantly, they're inspired things. She had made them for an earlier project that we had, but you know, when Helen showed up out of the back of the van, it emerges these two sculptures, and we thought they're made for those two spaces, and they actually help to, you know, pin down the composition brilliantly, don't they? They weren't a health and safety issue because they are so soft and light, and even if they fell over, they were no problem. And the other thing is, Trinity College, this is the museum building in Trinity College, designed by Thomas Woodward, who's from Cork, I gather, you know, the great 19th century Woodward and Dean architecture and combination. And they're really, it is the architectural gem in Trinity College. And they talk forever about the different kinds of stone represented. in all of the columns and the capitals and the other features in the floor, insets in the tiles and so on, all around it, mosaics up on the upper floor and so on. To pop something sculptural in there that was made of stuffed cotton, you know, was just like another moment of fun for all of us. We had great fun with that. And we're so grateful to Helen for having thought of it.
And Helen luckily arranged just behind, you see the archway on the right hand side, just back there under those stairs are rooms which she got us permission to use those rooms, classrooms, to have the teas and coffees, to put up all the costumes. So everything was really close by. So we didn't have to like travel people back and forth, and especially as it ended up being a really rainy day, that would have been pretty miserable for people. So.
Yeah, it's nicely contained. Another thing that is important to really, it'd be lovely because it deserves a whole chapter of a book in itself, is the photography. We had an issue among the Cailleacha about asking a man to photograph it, because it was such a women's project, but we actually knew that irrespective of gender, the best person for the job was what we needed, because there was just a one-off opportunity to do this. We couldn't call people back for another day and say, we got it wrong, can we do it again? I mean, even getting Trinity College, getting a busy working building where there are lectures going on upstairs while we were filming this, to get all that even set up was a big deal. So we went for the best photographer we knew of and who had experience in dealing with theatrical spectacle as well as visual arts, and who I didn't know at the time, but turned out to also have trained as an architect. So his sense of space and how to try to catapult all of the different levels of space here together so that the perspective isn't too fish-eyed or too, is that the right term? It is, isn't it? Or the ones at the back aren't too small and distant, involve really very, very detailed working out on his behalf. And the other thing is that the space in front of the steps here, from there to the door into the building, was very shallow. So he had a tripod, or in fact he had a huge tripod with several cameras on it. But he had to stand inside that, and if some tourists or somebody kept coming banging on the door, and sometimes if we didn't have a security person actually managed to open it, he and his cameras were gone flying, you know. It was all very precarious, but it worked.
Just the symmetry is amazing. First of all, the building itself, and the characters, and the centre, two subjects, Mary Robinson, just sit perfectly. It's so close, although it's nothing, it's not like the original painting, but it's the same concept. But going back from the pillars and just the symmetry on the left-hand side where I'm looking, there's a person in a yellow dress who's looking out with her hand out, and it actually balances the gap that would be there otherwise. Whose idea was that? Or did somebody call her from the side and say, you should be in this photo?
Yeah, I think it was probably Ross and I, because it was very tricky. Like the group behind where I'm sitting, that group of 3 women, and the group on that side, and also Cailleach, to make sure that everyone is seen, although Rachel didn't want to be seen, but to also keep that symmetry, you're right. So there's a number of different things we tried, like can we take a tiny step backwards, tiny step forwards, no, and that you're in that person's angle. So that was something that Ross and I worked out, yeah.
That's really good, very clever.
And you said it was a 15-minute performance. Was it 15 minutes you had there, or whatever?
That was about it. That we decided that if it went on any longer, people wouldn't be able to hold it because they're not performers. You know, like if it were dancers and actors, it would be a totally different thing. You know, but you just can't expect people to be able to, and especially when you position them, and then in between people start talking, you know, and then they're doing this, and they kind of, and you're like, okay, can you go back to your position? And they're sort of, like, no, your hand is higher. Oh, can you tilt your head this way? You know?
We had a very tight window anyway because Mary Robinson was only coming at 12.
That's right.
We didn't feel that we could ask her to come and just hang around like everybody else. So she came at 12, but she and the Provost more or less arrived at the same time. But we were due to be in the dining hall for this lunch that we were going to record because we reckoned the conversations were just as important. And if we go back to funding for a minute, we didn't know what we were going to do with this. I mean, we knew we had to pay our debts. We had to pay for lunch in Trinity. We wanted to pay Ross, the photographer. We wanted to pay people who had contributed serious work who were not either Cailleachs or participants in the project. We offered every participant in the project a print, that size sort of print of the event as a memento of the day, and we decided that we would make 10 larger prints, a metre and a half by a metre and a half roughly. It's not square, but roughly, and that we would try and sell them. And we have, I'm glad to say, already sold some and managed to pay our debts. We're not exactly in profit yet, but we're working on it. And they've been bought by national institutions, so that's good. We feel as if they deserve that, actually, all the people who participated. But for us, a very nice thing was that Trinity really embraced the project then. And so they brought their press office on board, and their press officer did such good work that it went on nationwide. It was on the news 3 times on the day it was filmed. The Irish Times covered it, and to our absolute astonishment, the Italian newspaper La Stampa had it on the front page the next day. So now we're trying to flog it to the Vatican, we'll see. We'll see where we go.
Can I ask you, did you ever think about going back onto the space in the show as a full scale image? Is there any option for it to be a full image of the...
One of the problems was we couldn't invite a single member of the public to view it there because the space was so restricted. So the only thing we could do ever was photograph it. So we suppose we took the best way out of it then, and it would be very hard to ask the participants to come back together again, I think.
No, I mean, as a representation, was there any talk about Trinity taking maybe back a large scale?
Oh,
I would like to see this hanging in Trinity.
So,
in the largest scale.
So would we all. That's an ongoing discussion at the moment. It's an ongoing discussion.
Maybe as a tapestry.
What?
As a tapestry.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, sure. Because it's woman or fabric.
Sure. Yeah.
As a tapestry.
Yeah.
It was like a performance though on the day, like sitting up there and looking out, because they're all the students, by that time all the students that were helping us were standing there. There was the photographer, his assistant, and there were a few other people on hand, so we did have a little bit of an audience, or kind of felt like an audience, I thought anyway.
And some were passing through, remember, in the end.
Oh yeah.
They weren't told, they were kind of passing through.
A lot of people were passing through. Anybody here who works in academia will know Rachel Moss here in the foreground booked through the buildings office in Trinity. She booked this space for us for that morning, for 3 hours that morning, to get ourselves in, 2 classrooms to do changes of costume in, and do all the rest of the behind the scenes work, and this space. Despite that, there were actually people pouring out of lectures up on the level, on the stairs, and getting very irate because we wouldn't let them pass through when the photography was happening, because the buildings office had forgotten to tell them. We had spoken to the person in charge of this building, of all the academic work and the tours in this building, and he told all the colleagues that he knew about, but some of those colleagues had swapped lecture opportunities with somebody else on the day and stuff. So the fact remains that there was huge activity going on, some of it with good grace, some with less good grace, but at the end of the day they all really enjoyed it. Oh yes, and I forgot to say, Trinity College's website got 14,000 hits in one weekend about this project. So actually, they were very proud of it. They now use it as one of the marketing tools for Trinity College. Now that was, so they have to buy it. You're dead right.
I was just going to say that
Yeah.
it works really well as projection. And like, I could see projected on a large scale building somewhere, and something much more ephemeral that you could move around the country. I mean, the Fiscal Arts Centre has a space now where they project on.
We'd love to do that, and we are doing a bit of that. We've shown it in 2 other places already, but it is a bit of a nightmare because you need a very, very good projector and a good wall space. We tried to get Dublin City Council to show it on the side of Dublin Castle, or City Hall, I should say. But they bought the print, but they didn't come back to us on that suggestion. Anyway, that was good. So, but thank you. Yeah, if you know anywhere that would like it, they can talk to us. Yeah. Sorry.
Discussed the footwear, or did you decide it's best to let everybody wear their runners, their boots, or did you say?
I think the Provost is wearing Doc Martens.
See, I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Their own shoe.
We were very clear about that.
Or was that just not?
No, we did it. No, we took a positive decision that people should be comfortable if they had to stand there, because it wasn't Raphael. We're not back in ancient Greece or the Italian Renaissance. We were in Trinity College on a cold, wet day, you know.
And it's really commentaries as well on contemporary. You know, it's just
Yeah.
that it's just kind of slipped in there. Yeah.
I love the runners.
I love
That's what I
And they are shoes as well.
And it always works out when people can do what they like, in a way. It always kind of works out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Was the method? Oh,
Sorry. I think, okay, we'll take the lead.
I want to applaud your effort. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I love what you're saying about Na Cailleacha as well, empowering women of older age. I think that's just really wonderful. I suppose what I'd love to ask, I suppose what I'd like is to see this in UCC, this UCC version of it, or the UCC, you know, I'd love you to come down the south or the west or whatever, and actually do the same with another gang of people. And I'd offer to help you actually, if you want.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So in terms of, like you've spoken about Trinity, you know, so that places it there. In looking at it and in terms of representing Ireland as such, would you have any comments or thoughts on the women that are here, the women that you might have liked to see in it, or do you think you've represented the women of Ireland here, or was that your aim?
It was our aim to represent the women of Ireland, and the fantastic women of Ireland there were, for the 41 women who are here, and actually if you take out the 8 Cailleachs who are there, that's only 33 women, I think. And so, because we don't count ourselves as leading women in Ireland. Although I think, you know, we probably have a right to be there as to represent one person between the 8 of us, say. But we're very proud of all the others, but there were another 200 women we could just as easily have asked. So we tried to represent different disciplines then. And we didn't rely entirely on our own preferences. We did talk to Women's Studies in Trinity, we talked to the National Women's Council, and we talked to Women's Studies in UCD. And we asked all of them to suggest who they thought would be suitable. And we tried to take as many of their suggestions on board as possible. Okay? And thank you, we'll take up your offer of help anytime you want it. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, you had a question.
You mentioned a woman in Raphael's painting.
Sorry?
You mentioned of a woman in Raphael's painting.
Yes.
Hippotea.
That's right.
Alexandra.
Yeah.
Now, she was an extraordinary woman because she was a mathematician, astrologist, and a philosopher, and she was educated by her father. Did she have an influence on this project, or were the collective aware of her work?
Some of us were, some of us weren't. I mean, some of us weren't aware of. Not everybody in the project was an art historian, for instance, or a philosopher, or an academic, or any of those things. They all knew Raphael's painting, but some knew it more as a fantastic painting, which it is. This is in no way a critique of Raphael. It's a critique of the philosophy of his time, which placed that woman among her peers, but in such a marginalised way.
Such an martyr as well, to such a tragic ending.
That's right, indeed. And I think
my reading about it was that Raphael insisted she be in it. A bishop apparently objected, because as you know, the patron was the Pope. A bishop had objected her to be in it, and Raphael wanted it front and centre. And if you look at his painting, she's the only one who's actually looking out at the audience.
yeah, I'm slightly sceptical about that actually, but yeah, a little. But anyway, we.
All art history is debatable. Which bit about looking out?
Yeah, because I think the person looking out is Raphael himself.
Yeah.
Well, if you look slightly to the left of her, it looks like a young girl. It almost looks like a younger version of her.
Well,
So, no, played a few visual tricks.
I think a lot of visual tricks, and there's a few visual tricks here too. Inevitably, anything that's constructed, and so we should always be questioning everything. And
But it's a wonderful project.
thank you, thank you.
On further on to that, wouldn't you have been tempted to put a man in as a woman in Spain?
We weren't very tempted, actually. Were we tempted to put a man in? Would you say?
Not really.
Sorry? Oh, just for.
It look really powerful that there are all these amazing women and only one man.
Yeah.
I think it would have actually, personally, it's my opinion,
Yeah.
would have made it seem so.
Yeah, that's a lovely thought. You see, that's the trouble. What kind of man would you pick, you know?
Technically, there are men. You see the photographs going up the staircase there. So there's all kinds of portraits and things up there. Yeah.
They're all men.
So there are men very present in the piece. Yeah.
We had a lovely moment, though, in relation to that, because we were invited by Trinity to have the lunch that we wanted to have in the Fellows' dining room, right? Or Fellows' common room. And, you know, that's not very many people are ever allowed in there unless they're Fellows of Trinity College, which are historically, I think about 1% of the Fellows over the history of Trinity have been men. But when you walk in, the only single portrait of a woman in the entire floor of that building faces you as you go in, and it's Queen Elizabeth I, who was the founder of the college. They never had another woman since then, so it was all the better that we were taking over that space, given that debate, and we had our lunch under the portrait of Elizabeth Tudor.
One requested, that's all. So they wouldn't take it down from King up now.
No, they won't, because he's not the founder of the college. Yeah. Anne said some of you might want to know a bit about the collective and how we manage. Is that of interest, or you've had enough of us? I'm sure we're here a long time.
Do you think of lowering the age at any stage?
Not for us, because I think we've sort of worked together as a unit now, and I think, you know, that'll see us through, but we'd be very happy to pass on any things that we learned about how to work together to other people. I mean, we have been asked, would we widen it to take more people into the collective? And some people within the group would quite like that, wouldn't they, Gerda?
Yeah. It's a kind of, it's a delicate thing. I mean, we miss Helen enormously, and we have to think about how the group can continue as well. You know, so it's a big question.
Like when members die.
Yeah.
Like Stana, when a member dies, another one.
Well, you see, that is the question, because Helen died and now we're down to 7.
Yeah.
And Helen actually said before she died, even though she died very suddenly, she was in very good health, and she just collapsed and died. But about 2 weeks before it, in fact, when we all met after this, she specifically said that if any of us died, we should keep the number 8 up. She saw the number 8 as associated with women anyway, and she's very interested in ancient spiritualities and stuff, not any, pagan myths and spiritual approaches, and very interested in theosophy. And she felt that 8 was a particular a number that had a kind of spiritual significance. Now, we don't all necessarily buy into that kind of spirituality. Some of us don't buy into any spirituality, maybe. But as far as...
Go back to Aristotle and Plato, where one...
Some of it would. No, not quite. We won't go that far. But I do feel, and I would, before ever Helen died, I was arguing against the group getting bigger than 8, because it's actually practically very difficult to keep 8 people together, because we're from all over Ireland. One is in Belfast, one is in Alliheat in West Cork, one is in Wexford, one's in Carlow, 2 are in Tipperary, one is in Dublin. And for us to have meetings, it's very difficult.
Do you actually meet then? Do you physically meet?
We do, but not often enough. We have a Zoom once a week, which is very helpful. But otherwise, it's expensive to bring everybody together, and none of us are really earning much, but we manage. And if it's important enough, we manage, we do.
You want to be together, you very much want to be together, So the Zoom is very important. We have a kind of focus talk every week on the Zoom, so we keep in contact from that point of view. But the getting together is very important.
That sounds amazing.
So how did you initially get together? You all knew each other?
No, we didn't.
No.
We met for the first time, all of us, on the 1st of September 2020.
So how did 8 become out of one?
Helen and Patricia and Terry were great friends already, and they had been, thinking, actually, Terry and Patricia have a dream which we would all like to pick up and work on, and you are all very welcome to come on board with this one. We were thinking of lobbying for some kind of sheltered accommodation for older artists across disciplines with studios. How difficult would that be? I think it should be very doable, it should happen, and models of it have existed in other places. So that's a little, it's a thought that we all hold very dearly but haven't done anything about yet. Because in the beginning we had to make ourselves into a collective, and we didn't all share even the notion that a collective was important. Everyone thought it'll be a bit of crack to go off to Cyprus, but we didn't do that. Then we found ourselves in Ballinglen, and actually COVID helped us to get to Ballinglen because everybody else who was invited or coming from the States or different places all dropped out that year. So they were able to have 8 of us for a month, and that meant that during that month we set ourselves topics of conversation about things that were fundamentally important to us, like our health, like our views about death, like our loss, losing friends, losing families, losing bits of our bodies, losing our hearing, our sight, how we communicate, all of those things. And by the time we'd spent a month talking about those and making art together, we had hammered out a few projects we wanted to do. We did a cross-Atlantic talk with the Gorilla Girls because they were another collective. So that was a nice little G-up for us. We made a print portfolio because we had to justify being in Ballinglen somehow, right? And some of us had never made prints before. Some of us had never made art before, me.
Yeah.
And
in our own practice, we had different studios. And 3 of us shared, but some had their own studio. And during the day we did our own practice, and at night we had a meal not cooked by us, which is a very nice thing.
And then at weekends we didn't have a cooked provided meal. You want to see the competition between the cottages to see who'd come up with the best meal when it was their turn. So we had those moments as well, but I think overall we just found that one project created a momentum for another project. So now, when we should be working to distribute this around the country, or try to get some international showings for it, because I think it's it's a nice way of marketing Ireland for a change, you know. We're busy planning our next project, so that's it's nice, you know.
And do you know what that's going to be?
We had a 2-day get together last week, and we've a bit of a list.
This is blue sky thinking.
We did blue sky thinking, exactly.
So but the nice thing is most things evolve. They kind of, you know, the little sparks, little seeds, and then some get legs and some disappear. But it's lovely, yeah. But it all works very well. We just get on very well. With no competition in the group, which is very important.
I think from an educational perspective, there's something really important about the group and the group producing this.
Yeah.
Just as a model of sort of real lifelong learning or real life-wide education, but also I think it's quite instructive that this is being produced by a group outside of academia. I wonder if there's something in that.
You know,
something like that being produced from inside academia, since it's a commentary on its own histories and politics. So I think there's an agency there that isn't just about passive consuming of knowledge as you grow older, but something more active.
I think that's a brilliant question, because it was a factor actually. I mean, one of the things when we all came together for the first time was that we realised how isolated everybody had become, because a lot of them had sustained their practice through teaching, and they weren't any longer teaching, and they didn't have the camaraderie and stuff, or the network or anything that they had once had. And maybe that made them just a little bit more anxious to make this work. So I think that was definitely a factor, maybe not a huge one, but a real one. And then another one, but to take your question further, could you do it in academia? I think you could, but you'd have to work out different things among yourselves. I mean, an awful lot came out of us up in Ballinglen that first month, setting topics for conversation that were about the challenges that we saw, and, you know, debating them hotly every evening, and not always agreeing by any means. And we did, in the first month, there were a few rows in the group and a few huffy moments when people thought, I'm leaving, bye, and then not leaving. And when they didn't leave, when, you know, we were still there at the end of a month, we knew that we had learned a lot about how to do it and to get over ourselves. So now I'd say we've actually grown to like each other. We didn't always, but we've more than liking each other. We really know that we can work together, and we like each other as well, actually, which is nice. Yeah. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's really, it's just a lovely model of what education can be outside of the academy, what kind of, you know, what can cultivate other than sort of
age and opportunity.
Education that we usually talk and delivering.
Yeah, you know, the Bealtaine festivals, which are run or were founded by Age and Opportunity. Age and Opportunity asked us 2 years ago if we would do a project with another collective, a younger collective, so that maybe we could highlight collectives and aging. And in fact, the collective that we found that we had the best conversations with, and chose to work with them, were a group called Art Nomads, there were 8 of us, there were 9 of them, we thought, and they're scattered all over the country. So in practical ways, we thought, and they had very different practices, as all of us have as well. So we thought maybe, we could see what we have in common and what we don't have, and what we can learn from each other. And that was really helpful. But the outshot of that, one of the outcomes of that, was that the person who does most of their administration then asked if we could mentor her. which was very nice, and it was a compliment because we really admired them. They were a terrific bunch, weren't they? Really admired them. But I think, yeah, maybe that had said something about age and experience, actually. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming. It's been a fantastic audience.